Welcome to the Southern Voice Rock Show. Here's your host, Jim Harris.
This is going to be a fun episode for you rock fans out there. We have the second part of our interview with 38 Special's Jeff Carlisi, and among other things, he's going to talk to us about the songwriting partnership that produced some of the band's biggest hits. We have an interesting piece of 38 Special trivia for you as well. Todd Ronning is with us, and Todd is with another one of my favorite bands, Bad Company. In addition to Bad Company, Todd is playing on the new Paul Rodgers solo album, Midnight Rose, and that's Paul's first solo work in over 25 years. Todd also co-wrote the first single, which is available now from the album, Living It Up. So we're looking forward to our conversation with Todd. Let's get into it. Todd, welcome to the Southern Voice Rock Show.
Well, thanks a lot, Jim. It's great to be here.
All right, so you are Canadian by birth.
Yeah.
I grew up in the South, so I have a fondness for all things Southern rock, probably more so than even a lot of mainstream rock. Is that kind of true with growing up in Canada? Do you have an affinity maybe for a lot of Canadian bands?
Yeah. There's actually quite a few Canadian bands that never made it into the American market. That just have a great bunch of songs in Canada. I mean, I can just name a bunch right off the top, like April Wine, Tragically Hip, Max Webster. It goes on and on. Like, everyone knows Rush, everyone knows Bryan Adams, but there's all kinds of bands that never really make it outside of Canada. They're absolutely excellent bands.
I would say three of my all-time favorites would be, you mentioned one, April Wine, which I've seen them several times, just an incredible band. Triumph,
yeah,
and Aldo Nova.
Yeah. Oh, Aldo Nova, yeah, for sure.
And he's back. He's coming back. He's got a new album dropping this year, I think.
Well, that's great, yeah.
So how did you get started in music?
Pretty young. I remember hearing Smoke on the Water and Highway Star and all these kind of songs coming out of Deep Purple, and I immediately went and got a record and just kind of immersed myself in that, probably at 12, and really made me want to start playing bass guitar, just the way Roger Glover was just pounding on the bass, which sounded so powerful.
Who else were early influences of yours?
I would say John Entwistle with The Who, and Paul McCartney, just his melodic type lines. And then I kind of went through a bit of a prog rock phase with Rush and Yes and bands like that. And then I kind of came full circle, and I just totally got myself involved in stuff like Led Zeppelin and things like that later on.
As I understand it, you have a brother that's a professional hockey player. Was that ever a choice for you, hockey versus music?
Well, I was a teenager at the time. I was like about 15 when I dropped hockey. I was just getting too busy with gigs and playing, and that was where my passion was at. I probably could have played somewhere. My brother played for like 17 years in the NHL. Very successful hockey career, and actually played in Nashville for about 4 or 5 years.
So I'm assuming that you were gigging around in local bands, but then you ended up in a band called King Karma. Was that your first big band and your first record deal?
Yeah, I would say that was. I was kicking around a lot of bands for a while throughout the 80s. In the 90s, a guitar player, Marcus Wolf, and I started working on writing songs. We sold some songs to other artists that were playing in Germany and things like that. And then eventually we thought, let's just do our own band. And it was kind of a search for a singer is what we were doing. We'd actually played with Paul a few times before that. And I believe the original Bad Company was getting back together, so Paul got busy with that. And then we thought, well, let's go and let's find a singer. So my brother was playing in Nashville at the time in hockey. And he was saying, I'm meeting all kinds of people here. You should maybe bring your thing down here and see if you can find somebody here that can sing. We just weren't able to find anybody here with what we wanted. And after playing with someone like Paul, it was pretty hard to find anybody close to that kind of thing. So I thought, maybe in the South, there'll be somebody there. And of course, after a couple of years, we found somebody, and that kicked off the King Karma thing.
How long did King Karma last? How was life in the band? And how did that come to an end?
We had a guy named Jimmy Johnson. A lot of people know him, one of the original Swampers. He took a real liking to our demos and helped produce the album right to the finished product. He had a lot of belief in it. We were going around looking for record deals, that sort of thing, and had to settle for some that maybe weren't as good as others. It was a tough business, but Jimmy opened up a lot of things for us, and we actually recorded half the album, the second half. We did the first half in Vancouver, and the second half down in Muscle Shoals with Jimmy at his studio.
Did you guys tour? Did you have like support gigs, or what happened after you dropped the album? We
did some support gigs with Nazareth, another band from Canada that probably people in the States don't know. It's called Streetheart, and that morphed into Loverboy eventually. And then we played some shows with Lynyrd Skynyrd when they came up to Canada, and that is a time when Paul was actually at one of those shows and saw us playing, and I would probably think that was a time when he probably thought, ooh, I like the sound of these guys, and if I ever need to get my solo band together, maybe these guys would be interested. That's my guess of what happened there, and that's probably what happened, because eventually we were his solo band about a couple years later.
Oh, okay. Well, that was a fortuitous turn of events. So that knocks out my my next question as to how the Bad Company gig came about. But what were your thoughts when you had the opportunity to step on stage with a band with the history like Bad Company?
It feels like there's a bit of weight on you. There's a lot of history there, and you certainly just want to make sure you have one hell of a good night. The guys really made me feel comfortable, and I just immersed myself in the music and just let it happen, and everything seemed to go really well. The first show I did was with Paul by himself, and it had Jason Bonham on drums at that time. And I remember in the sound check, I think my buddy Marcus, he goes, hey, you haven't met Jason yet, so let's come on up. So I'm meeting Jason, like, as he's kind of tapping his drums, getting them ready. Mark goes, hey, this is the bass player. The new bass player is here. He goes, oh, my kick support has arrived, has it? And that's how it kind of started off with him, right? My kick support. And that particular gig, I remember thinking to myself, here I am, I got Jason Bonham on drums, Paul singing, Howard Leese from Heart on guitar, and little old me on bass. And then Joe Elliott's watching from the side because he backed up the show with his Down and Outs band. And I'm going, holy smokes. With a little bit of pressure, but
would say so.
Made it through and everything was cool. Yeah, a little bit of pressure, yeah.
Well, obviously you came through it quite well.
I made it through, yeah.
You've been with Bad Company and or Paul for now, over 10 years, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was back with Paul 2011. And then the next year we were at the Swedish Rock Fest doing Bad Company.
Wow. And, of course, your guitar player now is Howard Leese, as you mentioned, from Heart. And we have had a couple of his buddies on recently, Denny Carmasi and Mark Andes, another great band, another great heritage, and another great player. I mean, you guys definitely have an incredible array of talent. In your experience with Bad Company, was there ever a time that you were just standing on stage looking out and it just sort of dawned on you, I'm playing bass for Bad Company?
Well, I would say that happened pretty much every night. I never, ever took it for granted. It just, I don't know, just playing these iconic songs that I grew up with and just the crowd's reaction. I remember once we were in Atlantic City. We were playing Feel Like Making Love, and then this guy, he just jumps out into the aisle and gets down on one knee and proposes right then and there.
Oh, wow.
I think Paul said something after the song, but just crazy things like that not crazy, but just big things would happen while we're playing. It's a big event for some people's lives, and just seeing that happen is really cool.
All right, well, let's kind of fast forward to current times, and I know Paul you guys have been in the studio with Paul for his new solo record, which I think is, if I'm not mistaken, his first new material solo record in maybe 25 years or so. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that is correct. Yeah. It's been a long time since he's done some new music.
That album drops in September.
Yeah, September 22 to be exact. I think they're going to drop it with some vinyl, maybe CDs as well, and then the digital type things.
The first single, Living It Up, is available, and you were a co-writer of that song.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, I kind of had the music, and I kind of demoed it. And the drummer, Rick Feddick, we were kind of just tweaking it and that sort of thing. And I thought to myself, this might be something that Paul would be interested in. It's right up his alley. It's got lots of spots for vocal ideas and all that sort of thing. So I just sent him the music. And he came back right away and said that he loved it and that he already had some ideas.
That worked out well then.
Yeah.
How's the single performing so far?
From what I understand, really good.
Are there going to be any other singles that drop before the album releases, or is this going to be it until September?
Well, I think they're going to drop one more.
One of the questions I'm sure everyone is going to ask, are there any plans for either as a solo artist with you guys in the band or as Bad Company for any kind of tour schedule?
I don't know of anything like that as of yet, but you never know what could be in the works. But I really haven't heard anything on any kind of tour at this point.
There's always surprises. We were glad to see Paul in the Skinner tribute at the Country Music Show.
Yeah, I saw that too on TV. It was really good. He's really tight with those guys, and he was at the funeral and all that sort of thing down in Jacksonville, and just kind of continued on from there with Gary and Gary's passing and that sort of thing. And he's been tight with those guys for quite a long time. We toured with them a lot, and they were just great people, a lot of fun. We had some great shows.
Well, it's astounding how many people in Southern rock cite him and his various bands as influences.
Yeah. When I was living in Nashville for a couple of years, I found that there was a lot more attention to what he did with Free. A lot of musicians and singers are heavily influenced by him in the Southern rock. I remember seeing Government Mule doing Mr. Big with the big bass solo, and there's definitely a extra appreciation for what he's done in the South.
Well, Todd, is there anything else on the horizon for you? Anything you're working on or any projects you're contemplating?
Well, I've been working on possibly recording some more tunes with the King Karma guys. I think Paul still is writing. I don't know, there might be something still going on there. And that's basically what I've been doing. Might have some new music still to come. But this release, there's going to be a whole lot of things happening, I'm sure. So I'm just kind of preparing myself for all that.
For those that haven't heard the album, the King Karma album is definitely worth a listen. It's a great rock album, and I think everyone would really enjoy it. It's available on iTunes.
Yes, thanks. Yeah. It was a real good rock album. It still gets plays all over the place. I'm real proud of that record.
Well, I enjoyed listening to it. Todd, would you mind staying in touch with us and maybe updating us if there's any big news on anything like tour appearances or the new King Karma, anything along those lines? We'd love to be able to pass that along to our listeners.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'll absolutely keep in touch. I appreciate your interest on that. Yeah, this album coming out 22nd, title is Midnight Rose. I can't wait. I mean, we put 8 songs down on it. I love all 8.
A lot of buzz about the artwork on the cover, too.
Oh, yeah, that was done by Cynthia. Paul's wife is quite the artist. And, I kind of like that, too. It was a really neat-looking album.
A lot of things about that album to be excited about, especially the first new music from you guys with Paul in 25 years. It's exciting.
Yeah, and we got really good people that were helping us with it. Bob Rock produced it. We got Randy Staub, who mixed it. We had Brian Adams, guitar player Keith Scott, throwing a few things here and there. Yeah, who else is on there? Let's see, Leslie Page from Joe Walsh. We toured with them for a while. She did some vocals on a couple of tunes. I think Dance in the Sun, Take Love. We had Jim Mattingly from Garth Brooks. He did a whole string section on the title track, Midnight Rose. It just sounds great.
I speak for a lot of our listeners when I say we're really looking forward to this.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us. I know with this record about to drop, you probably have a million things going on, so it's not lost on me that it was a big favor for you to carve out some time for us. So I really thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no problem, Jim. Thanks.
In this week's covers, we've got a pop song turned into a real rocker. In 1976, British pop star Cliff Richard released a song, Devil Woman, that went to number 6 in the United States. In 2004, the Chicago band American Motherlode included a remake of Devil Woman on their album Come to Life. Make no mistake, this one is not pop. It's a rocker, and we think you'll like it. Let's get into part 2 of our interview with Jeff Carlisi from 38 Special. Jeff, we're this far in, and we haven't even touched on another band that our listeners are very, very familiar with, and that is, of course, your band, 38 Special. And you alluded to graduating with a degree in architecture, and I've heard in interviews previously that you said, the economy being a bit of a struggle at the time basically created the window in which you decided to pursue a band until things improved and architecture might open up for you. And 38 Special was that stop. But getting into 38, and you've covered in a lot of interviews the formation, so on and so forth, but I wanted to really ask you about kind of the shift in the paradigm, if you will, with the Rockin Into the Night album. And that album, from an outside standpoint, fan standpoint, had 3 major changes for the band, 38 Special. You'd had 2 albums that sold modestly. With Rockin Into the Night, you had the single that was written by Jim Peterick and other guys from Survivor. You had a change in producer from Dan Hartman to Rodney Mills, and I think that was Rodney's first effort as a producer. And then you had the single that hit with lead vocals being done by Don Barnes.
Right.
So those are pretty substantial changes for a band. How did the band internally react?
Well, first of all, we realized, and that was a bit of an overstatement when you said modest success on the first 2 records, and certainly not taking anything away from Dan Hartman, because we learned a lot. It was a great experience. We were pretty green at the time as a band, and we were, in those first 2 records, still evolving, but we were still stuck I don't want to say stuck. We're still trying to emulate or create a bit of everything that had already been done in Southern rock, whether it was the Allmans or Skinner or Marshall Tucker or Charlie Daniels or Outlaws or whatever, and realize, you know what? This has all been done by the best. And if we're going to have a shot here, we need to change. We didn't know how, but we just knew we couldn't do the same thing. So as we were evolving, the songwriting for the Rockin Into the Night record began to change a bit without losing the spirit of how we played. And Don Barnes started, he wanted to sing some songs, and there were a couple of songs on there that he did a vocal on, but the album was done. It was in the can and ready to go get mastered. And I believe Rodney went up to master it and asked our manager, Mark Spector, if he heard the singles. And he said, no, he said, it's a really good record. Don't know if I hear a hit single yet. And fortuitously, we got a tape through the mail. It was a relationship I think Mark had with a guy named John Kolodner. I think they knew each other from CBS. They worked at CBS together before Mark was at A&M. And John had a great track record of discovering and nurturing bands from Aerosmith to the list goes on and on. Anyway, Jim Peterick had this band Survivor. And for some reason, I think Ron Nevison was producing that record. And I don't think Jim even remembers why this happened, but he didn't want that song on the record, Rockin Into the Night. And so it was just sitting around. And I think through John Colombo, he said, you got to send it to 38 Special. Sounds like they could do something with it. So we got it. And I remember going over to Don's house, Don Barnes, and playing the tape. I said, it's pretty cool. And he said, do you think we can pull this off? And I said, well, the melody is a little unique in the sense of what we had been doing before. We kind of collectively said, why don't you give it a shot? Maybe you could sing it. Just thinking that might be one way to go about it. Well, we took it to rehearsal and played it for the band and played it for Donnie. And I remember specifically, Donnie said, I don't have a feel for that. I mean, he was very candid and very honest about it. He goes, I'm not sure if I like that melody or if I could really pull that off. I said, okay, fair enough. And we went back up to Atlanta and cut the track, and Don sang it. And it was like, whoa, this is good. Sounds great. He did an incredible job on the vocals. And there was we were very excited about it all of a sudden, and the band saying, well, Donnie should have a shot singing it, which that's fine. And he came back and he sang the vocal against the track. And it was very good. It was very good, but there was just something that wasn't quite. When you write a song, when you sing a song, you got to sell it. And it doesn't matter what type of music it is, you have to sell it. You got to make it believable. And it doesn't mean that you're not a good guitar player or that you're not a good singer or anything. It's just you've got to make it believable. And there was something in Don's performance that just, you believed it. The conviction was there. And so we, collectively all made the decision. I talk about it again in my book, Jam. It's for the benefit of everybody. So you have to put those egos aside and just let all for one and one for all, and whatever is the best decision at the time to benefit everybody and your future, that's what you have to do. And we did it, and we're very fortunate that was our first top 40 single. Finally, we were on the map after 2 records that didn't do much. Record company, of course, was very happy about it. And it gave us the confidence, I guess you'd say, in the next batch of songwriting that we did to lead into Wild Eyed Southern Boys, because number one, we had a new friend and collaborator in Jim Peterick. We'd not met him yet, but we were able to get together with him and write for a few years together with great success, but also realizing, okay, with the music, we can experiment in some other areas and some other bands that we like and trends in music that will take us out of the stereotype Southern sound, if you will. The Cars being a big light bulb turning on when we heard Just What I Needed, and it's kind of like, oh, eighth notes, that's kind of cool. And that kind of led into Hold On Loosely and that whole style that we took our blues and rock sensibilities with some of the pop and, if you will, new wave sounds and created a distinctive 38 Special sound.
Hold On Loosely was the first song written jointly with you, Don, and Jim Peterick, I believe. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
And
yep, that's correct.
A little trivia for our listeners. I believe it was the 13th video played on MTV the day that they started, August 1st, 1981.
Yes, it was. I remember, I want to say it was probably April. We were in Denver, Colorado. Great guy, Barry Fay, who was the promoter out there, and he had several different venues. Obviously, there was Mile High Stadium, and there was McNichols Arena, and whatever. But he had this venue that was called the Rainbow Music Hall, which I want to say was maybe 1,000 seats. And it was kind of one of the stages the up-and-coming bands would play and on their way up. So we were there doing a show. Hold On Loosely had just come out. It was on the radio, but people knew us from Rockin Into the Night. All of a sudden, we were getting a fan base. We were doing sound check, and I remember this guy coming up to me, and introducing himself. I'm up on the stage and the guitar on, and so I lean over and he says, yes, he said, you probably already know we're going to be here. We're going to have some cameras and we're going to be filming your show tonight for music television. And I hadn't really heard anything about it at this point in time. I said, that's interesting. What is it? He goes, it's going to be on videos and films of artists doing their songs, and we're going to broadcast it on cable TV. I said, that's cool. What's cable TV? He explained, and I said, okay, all right, well, that sounds good. And I remember the last thing I said to him was, good luck on that venture of yours. I hope it works out. Well, there was the beginning of MTV. So that was in April of 81. As you said, August 1st, 1981, MTV launches. I didn't know until many years later that the song, the Hold On Loosely, aired on that first day and was number 13. The way I found out about it was MTV, the 20th anniversary of the launch of MTV. So it would have been 2001, I guess, August 1st, 2001. They aired the entire 24 hours, the first airing of MTV. They didn't do it on MTV. They were afraid that their audience was going to think they were too old, so they did it on VH1. I remember I was at the house, so now this would be kind of neat, and watching the Buggles doing Video Killed the Radio Star. And there's Pat Benatar, Rod Stewart, I think REO Speedwagon. Yeah, I can't remember, all the different artists, but I remember telling my wife, I said, I don't know if it's the first day or whatever, but we're probably on here somewhere pretty early because of the recollection of them filming the band in Denver. So it got to about number 10, and I said, all right, I've had enough. And I went in the other room to do something on the computer or whatever, and all of a sudden I hear a scream, it's you guys! I ran in there, and sure enough, there was Hold On Loosely. Yeah, that's correct, number 13. I said, man, if I'd have known it was going to be this early in, I'd have dressed better.
That day certainly was the omen, if you will, of things to come, because that definitely caused a major shift in the music business.
Well, it did. I mean, it saved it, for one. I don't remember specifically, but I remember the music business was in a bit of a lull from album sales weren't great and what have you, and that just really gave it a shot in the arm. As you said, image became incredibly important, and some bands really took advantage of that. ZZ Top probably being one of the best as far as an image that you could see that sold records, and plus they were a cool band. Yeah, it changed the industry. And then it's, as we all know, it's morphed over the years. Like I said, they showed that on VH1. Then there's VH1 Classic, and there's all these different formats for music. But that was the beginning. That started it.
Let's circle back around to the songwriting partnership with Jim Peterick. Prior to his involvement with 38, you guys had kind of spread songwriting duties across the band. How did the decision come about that you and Don would be the primary partners with Jim Peterick, or was that something just happened, or was that a conscious decision?
No, I think it just happened. It's one of those things where you come back from the first writing session, and they were all ideas that Don and I individually or collectively put together. And we came back and worked them up with the band and said, oh, cool songs. And then you're reinforced with the success of a song on the radio. The formula kind of has been established. And over the years, myself and Donnie and Jim wrote songs together. There were songs like Rebel to Rebel was a collaboration with all of us. But it's just the sound of Don's voice. It was a style that we created that worked. So, like the old expression goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It happened naturally. It wasn't a conscious effort. When we were, very comfortable working with Jim, it's funny you talk about that first trip to Chicago. Again, Hold On Loosely was the first song that we collaborated on. And we're sitting at kind of a little kitchen bar area. His wife, Karen, was making nachos for us, and we're going back and forth. Don had, the title. It's a great title, Hold On Loosely. And Jim said, but don't let go. And I had the riff. And so we started throwing things around. Jim was a real prolific lyricist. And we're bouncing ideas back and forth. And so it's kind of, okay, if you cling too tightly, you might lose control. And Don came up with the title because he was going through a relationship, and it was to try to avoid divorce. The message was to his wife at the time to, give me some space to breathe in. I just and it was a message that so many people and fans understood. Obviously, that contributed to it being the successful song that it was. And 40 years later, the meaning is still valid and the song is still credible. Jim would sketch out some verses and some ideas and whatever. And he'd say, all right, I'm going to go away for a minute. I'll be back. You guys just hang out. And he would just disappear. I'm going to go back in the bedroom out back or whatever. And he'd be gone 20, 30 minutes or whatever. And I remember I went into his music room and I'm looking at pictures on the wall, waiting for him to come back. And there's this picture of this guy playing guitar. He's got big old mutton chops on, sideburns, mutton chops, and playing guitar and singing. So Jim comes back in. I said, hey, Jim, who's this guy? He goes, that's me. I said, you're kidding. He says, no. He said, I was 18. I said, wow, that's a pretty cool picture. I said, what was your band's name? He said, the Ides of March. And I said, yeah, right. No, seriously, what was your band? He said, Ides of March. I said, Jim, there was a band already called the Ides of March. And he goes, yeah, that was me. And I went, Vehicle? And he goes, that was his first hit, number one song.
Great story behind it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was slack-jawed, just going, you're kidding me. I had no idea. I'm laughing. Yeah, you didn't know that there was an Ides of March already, and we had no idea what his, prior to Survivor, what his history was. And we went back to the table and started writing and finished that song. So what else you got?
I don't know if you guys ever did this, but what an experience it would have been to have 38 cover Vehicle.
Great idea.
What a song. And for those that haven't heard our interview with Jim, he wrote that song to get his girlfriend back that ended up becoming his wife. And now, as he said, they have grandkids, so he thinks they're going to make it.
Yeah, right. Well, and good nachos, too.
Yeah. So Jim was a heavy influence on, I guess a good way to phrase it, I read a rock writer's article about 38 Special some years back, and they said that the way the writer phrased it, Rockin' Into the Night opened the door for 38 Special, and Wide-Eyed Southern Boys kicked the door down. Jim, of course, Rockin' Into the Night, but then he was a heavy influence on Wild-Eyed Southern Boys and Special Forces. Then on Tour de Force, you guys had taken over the songwriting responsibilities inside the band again. Was that logistically something that happened with Jim, or a conscious decision to move toward shifting the writing responsibility back internally?
No, it was definitely logistics, if you will. I mean, Jim was going through some problems internally with his own band, with Survivor. And I think there was some resentments and some jealousies. And I think some of the members of the band thought that he was giving away his best ideas. And Jim's explaining, he goes, they're not my ideas. These guys, it's a whole nother avenue as a songwriter just to help them interpret their own songs. Collaborations are wonderful because it allows you to take the musical blinders off and see things from a different viewpoint. And Jim, he loved what we were doing. He loved the way we played guitar. He loved the vibe of the band. And when the recording of Rockin' Into the Night came out, when he heard it, he just said, oh, my God. He said, that's phenomenal. He said, that's better than we could have done it. You guys just really understood it. And years later, we did some covers, some songs that were presented to us by Bryan Adams and Jim Valance, his songwriting partner. Not only Teachers, but our Teacher, but Back to Paradise. And when we did Teacher, Brian said, we were on the same label. Brian said, I love the band. And when he heard it, he goes, that's just such a great, you caught the attitude, and your rendition was fantastic. So once you get somebody else that believes in you that much more, they tend to want to work with you more or give you more songs, all the above. And with Jim, I don't think there were members of his band that really understood the dynamic of collaborations. That, Jim said, I can't do this by myself. These guys are coming to me with some great riffs and some solid ideas. Now, the more he started to understand the band conceptually as a great songwriter, he did write some stuff on his own. The title song for the Wild Eyed Southern Boys album, which was titled appropriately Wild Eyed Southern Boys. He said, hey, man, I wrote this song. It just reminded me of you guys. And at the time, we were going, well, we're just now starting to break away from stigma, if you will, of another Southern rock band, which we realized that there had been enough great Southern rock bands. We didn't need another one. So we're getting out of it. And all of a sudden he goes, I got a song called Wild Eyed Southern Boys. So when we finished the record, and we had let's see, Wild Eyed Southern Boys, Fantasy Girl, see, Chain Lightning was on the next one, Caught Up in You.
Was 20th Century Fox on that album?
You got me on a technicality.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I think it was a later album, but it could have been that. But that wasn't a collaboration. That wasn't a song with Jim. So I think that the only two on that record, maybe You Keep Running Away, that might have been on that, or that might have been, I don't know. But you had Fantasy Girl, Hold On Loosely, and Wild Eyed Southern Boys. So then we're in the studio and we get the first album cover proof. And, as we looked at it, first of all, I don't think the band ever liked or any album cover we ever had, plain and simple. And the more we try to voice our opinion or ideas, the record company went, you guys just stick to the music. We handle all the artwork, which was completely bizarre. So we got this album cover, and there's the pickup truck, the smashed beer can, the girl in the hot pants, the neon sign on the bar wall, and whatever. We're going, oh my God, this is exactly what we're trying to avoid right now. And the irony of it was they did a survey and they figured the album cover alone was worth 250,000 records. and it became an image that turned the band into the band that's carrying the banner for the South now and keeping Southern music alive in a new way. And we just kind of shrugged our shoulders and said, whatever, I'm tired of trying to figure it out. I mean, it's really funny dynamics that goes on between a record company and a band, artistically, creatively. And fortunately, they didn't get involved with our recordings. They only came to the studio if they were invited. We didn't have people coming in questioning the recording process. So we were very, very lucky there with A&M Records.
You are probably, in my guess, one of the few architect rock stars. That typically a degree in architecture isn't a prerequisite for being a rock star for most people. But I'm curious, is there anything about, your training and your education to become an architect that you think applied to maybe your methodology in how you went about songwriting, structure, discipline, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jim. I don't know. First of all, backing up, one of the questions that I'm asked frequently is, how did you go from architecture into music? I says, well, I've always been involved in music and played in high school, played when I was in college. But I said, when I graduated, actually about 3 months before I graduated, I got a phone call from Donnie Van Zant and Don Barnes. They were already in the process of putting a new band together. And they knew I was getting out of school and wanted me to become a member of the band. And at that time, I knew that, or for any of you out there that are old enough to remember 1974, interest rates were got 16% and climbing, and getting ready to go into oil embargoes and everything else. So the economy, the interest rates were so high, nobody was building anything. And of course, architecture is designing buildings, right? So I'm thinking, well, I've just finished 4 years of school. I was still very much passionate about music, but not really thinking, even at that point in time, about making it a career the rest of my life. And so I said, yeah, I'll be out in June. And literally a week after I graduated, I was rehearsing with the band. And did a bunch of covers, obscure covers, just so we could go out and start playing some clubs. And we were dabbling in some songwriting or whatever. It was a while before we got an agent, and through the help of Ronnie, a manager, and through the manager, a record deal leading up to our contract with A&M and our first 2 albums. Up until then, I figured, well, a couple of years and I'll go back to being the next Frank Lloyd Wright. To answer your question, or I'm not sure if I can answer it, the one similarity between architecture and music, I mean, yeah, you could say there's a discipline in creating, building something to the next step, but it's kind of apples and oranges. A T-square and a pencil is different than a guitar and a pick. But the similarity is that with designing and architecture, you start out with a blank piece of paper, tracing paper. Nothing's on it. Just 2-dimensional nothing until you start putting something on it and seeing something develop, and then maybe taking it to 3 dimensions in a model. With music, you're holding an instrument, or you're behind a piano or holding a guitar or whatever. There's nothing there. Like the old story, somebody went up to Chet Atkins one time, and he goes, "Man, that guitar sounds so good. Just incredible sounding guitar." Chet put it over on a stand. He goes, "How does it sound now?"
Good point.
Yeah. The point is that you're taking this instrument, be a pencil or a guitar or whatever, and you're creating something out of thin air, out of your imagination, out of your soul, whatever. Influences. Architecture. Oh, I love the way so-and-so designed, whether it be Philip Johnson or Frank Lloyd Wright or Kenzo Tange or any of these guys. I'm going to incorporate some of those senses. Same thing with music. The Beatles or the Stones or the Clapton's playing in Cream, Leslie West, Duane Allman, and the list goes on and on. And you continue to keep listening and learning. And anything you do creatively, you just got to keep listening and learning. And they said, guitar players who influenced you? I said, well, many people, but I did a list of 10 people, and one of the guys I know was Brian May. Somebody said, "Brian May? You don't sound like Brian May." Well, of course I don't. I'm not supposed to, and I don't want to, because he does that. But it's his thought process and how he approaches layering guitars, or more specifically, his melodic approach to playing a solo. You can sing it later on. Freddie finishes singing, and he does something just as valid or takes it even to the next level. And I always wanted to do that, is to play guitar solos. It's fun to just rip out some blues or whatever, but especially songs that have melody, that have potential to be a hit and are memorable. You want to put something that really enhances everything you've done before. So Brian was the guy that made me realize, oh, I see how you do it. Yeah, you're influenced by people, and then you design in your own way after that. Or you put all the ingredients in a big pot, mix it up, and taste it, and go, tastes pretty good.
Well, obviously, the finished work speaks for itself in that, you guys were obviously very successful in songwriting. We'll be back next week with the conclusion of this great interview with Jeff Carlisi. For this week's Hidden Gem, we want to recommend the 1982 self-titled debut album from Canadian rocker Aldo Nova. Nova went on to write songs for a lot of pop stars and other rockers like Blue Oyster Cult and Bon Jovi. But in spite of the fact that he had some pop influence, this album is nothing but sheer rock and roll. 1982's Aldo Nova. I'm going to share a couple of events with you guys. I will be attending each of these in person, so I hope I get a chance to meet some of you. The first one is Friday, July 28th at the City Winery in Atlanta. Alan Paul, who you recently heard on our show, will be there talking about his new book, Brothers and Sisters, and that's about the creation of and production of the Allman Brothers album, Brothers and Sisters, their best-selling album ever. Also, he'll be signing books, answering some questions. There'll be an Allman Brothers tribute band, End of the Line, and some very special guests, including Tommy Talton. And Tommy was a co-founder of the band Cowboy. He played with Greg Allman for years and appeared on the Brothers and Sisters recording. Tickets are available at citywinery.com. The following weekend, Saturday, August the 5th, is the annual Buford Jam. It's held at the Tannery in Buford, Georgia, and admission is free. Our friend Marty Orr's been involved with this event for over 40 years, and they have had some incredible entertainment without a doubt, but this year's lineup may just blow the roof off the place. The evening starts at 6:30 with our friends from South Carolina, 7 Year Witch. You've heard them on our podcast before. They recently did a tour of the left coast with Buck Cherry. They played the Viper Room and the Whiskey. Great events, went so well they're headed back to L.A. Next on the card, Derek St. Holmes. You know him from Ted Nugent, Whitford St. Holmes, St. Paradise, Michael Schenker, Vanilla Fudge. And if you think this guy sounds great on your phone or streaming, you haven't seen anything until you've seen him live. He will rock you. Last but not least, the hottest band out of Nashville, Texas Hill, featuring guitar slinger Bart Walker, and Bart plays for Hank Williams Jr. Little inside information, the Tannery has great food and a super friendly staff, so you're going to have a wonderful evening, and remember, admission is free. I hope to see you there. I want to thank our guests Todd Ronning and Jeff Carlisi for being with us. We'll be back next week with a new episode, including the conclusion of our interview with Jeff and a lot more good rock and roll. So we'll see you then. Until then, keep rocking.
Thanks for listening.